So welcome everybody. Most of us know each other anyway. I would just like to remind to tune down your cell phones. This will be a two-day seminar. I will first proceed with a short introduction for the Aikaterini Laskaridis Foundation, and it will be followed by a keynote speech by Mr. Laskaridis, Professor Zhang Lihua, and Zuokui, and then we will have a discussion that will end in the garden with food and drink. So, here we are, China, Greece, and the Eastern Mediterranean, a common project between the foundation and Tsinghua University, with the Aikaterini Laskaridis, for which I will now say a few words. The Aikaterini Laskaridis Foundation has as scope to promote Greek arts and letters, as well as maritime tradition and history. And it does this through libraries, collections, educational programs, cooperation with universities and some museums, and it supports maritime tradition and history. We have a lending library. You can see some numbers there. The main subjects that are covered, for which we believe we are especially strong, are children's book, maritime studies, and Greek letters. The library in which we are now, the building in which we are now, is the historical library of the foundation. Essentially, it is a library of libraries. It comprises collections of important personalities of letters and science. It covers subjects of ancient Greek letters and science, Byzantium and Ottoman periods, the Greek Enlightenment, early 16th to 19th century travelers, and modern Greek letters and science after the end of the Greek Revolution. One library for which we are particularly proud about is the Bibliotheca Greca on that side of the wall. It consists of everything that has been written from ancient Greek writers in their first printed editions or incunabula from the 15th century to the 18th century. It is the first editions or the most, the available oldest editions of these books. Another important collection is the collection of the president of this foundation, Panos Laskaridis. It is a collection of travelers' books. They are the books that were written by travelers, European travelers, who visited the Ottoman Empire during the 16th to the 19th century, and then wrote their memories about their travels. So we have more than 100 incunabula and old prints in this building. And we try to do educational programs centered on our libraries or on things that interest the new generation that have to do with school but are not taught at school. So we have more than 150 different educational programs and more than 30,000 children every year. In order to promote to the younger generations the content of the libraries, we try to do it through technology. So we have programs and projects on internet and on as applications for mobile devices. Topos Text is such an application. I would encourage you to download it. It's free, and it connects this library, what has been written about ancient Greek world by the ancient writers. It connects it with the geography of the ancient world through Google Map and English translation of the original texts. Another project that is interesting is Travelogues. Travelogues is a collection of some 22,000 engravings, mostly from this collection, and also from collections of books from large libraries in Athens. The Gennadios Library, the Onassis Library, and private collections such as a collection from a late Mr. Finopoulos. Based on the same concept, we are now in a phase of compiling the same kind of site for the texts of these books, not only the pictures, but also the text. This is a much greater project. We have finished the 16th century by now, and we are continuing with the 17th century writers and so on, together with the Gennadios Library. The foundation also has a strong maritime flavor. We have renovated lighthouses. The lighthouses belong to the Navy. We have renovated lighthouses and we have maritime collection. The most important of our maritime collections is the Nelson collection. It is the largest collection in private hands, consisting of items, personal items and letters of Admiral Nelson. We have signed an MOU with the National Maritime Royal Navy Museum, and we are going to exhibit our Nelson collection in Portsmouth at the museum outside Victory, the ship of Nelson, in 2021. We also have participated in underwater activities of the Effort of Underwater Antiquities at the Antikythera shipwreck. And we support the Navy and Coast Guard in many expensive ways. Coming more close to what we do together with Tsinghua, we have initiated with the University of Amsterdam Faculty of Humanities, the Marilena Laskaridis Chair of Modern Greek Studies. Professor Boletsi has been elected to the post as professor there. And we give scholarships, both to Amsterdam, but also in Greece in various contests and prizes. Finally, today we are here in the context of our cooperation with the University of Tsinghua. You can see how it started in 2015. some of the faces are here today. Many smiles. And this is Tsinghua. I will now show you a short video about Tsinghua University.
Located in northwest Beijing, Tsinghua University has over 100 years of history. It was established as a preparatory school for students who were sent by the government to study in the U.S. The campus was originally the former site of the Qing dynasty's imperial gardens. It was listed as one of the world's most beautiful campuses. Tsinghua University is where East meets West. International students come from 116 countries around the world. In Tsinghua, students have the opportunity to collaborate with renowned professors in various disciplines attend talks and lectures of the world's most influential leaders and scholars. And enjoy the extensive learning resources on campus. Chinese culture is deeply rooted in Tsinghua's education environment. Tsinghua provides opportunities for students to pursue and discover their passions. Sports is an exceptional tradition in Tsinghua. And the art and cultural life is enriching. Tsinghua University Art Museum showcases the fusion between art and science. This is where you can have discussions with the world-class scientists. In Tsinghua University, we strive for innovation and research excellence. Tsinghua University encourages innovative solutions to present issues that face mankind. Tsinghua has changed the lives of many. With the motto of self-improvement and social responsibility, the Tsinghua community continues to dedicate itself to the development of China and the world, with wisdom and strength in various fields.
Hi there, I'm Dong. I'm a student in finance in Tsinghua University. I got my bachelor degree in journalism and communication also here in Tsinghua. Like staying in Tsinghua for 5 years, I really enjoy my life here.
My name is Alex Springer. I graduated from MIT and now I'm studying for my master's degree here at Tsinghua University. I had the opportunity to live, learn, and grow to prepare myself as a global citizen ready to tackle the challenges of the 21st century.
The Aikaterini Laskaridis Foundation and Tsinghua University signed their agreement on 6 October 2015. The agreement covers initially 5 years through 2020. The purpose aims to assist and promote Greek classical and modern studies, Sino-Hellenic relations and texts by Chinese students and scholars in China and Greece, and this will be achieved by academic work and exchanges of Greek and Chinese students, scholars between Greece and China in a number of different activities. And this is what has been going on since 1st January of 2016. The project is part of the Research Center for China-EU Relations of the School of Social Sciences at Tsinghua University, and the center is in the process and will set up a chair entitled Marilena Laskaridis Chair for Greek Classical and Modern Studies. What we do short annual exchange visits of Tsinghua University students here in Greece. We do joint annual academic events in Beijing or Athens, just as we are doing today. We provide Marilena Laskaridis fellowships for civilizational dialogue. We are working towards a Marilena Laskaridis chair, hopefully. And we have non-resident Marilena Laskaridis fellowships. This was all regarding a general knowledge about what we are and what we are doing together. I would now ask Mr. Panos Laskaridis, President of the Aikaterini Laskaridis Foundation and also President of the European Community Shipowners Associations, to take the floor.
Dear friends, dear guests, and especially those who came from overseas, first of all, let me welcome our guests from China, distinguished scholars. Thank you very much for taking the long trip to come here and be with us today and tomorrow. And let me also thank Tsinghua, all our friends there, and also the administration of the university for the nice relation and the excellent cooperation we have had all these last years. As the Admiral said, in the recent 2 years, I've had the honor to head the European Shipowners Association as a chairman from Greece, and therefore it was quite easy to decide to speak about the shipping relations between Greece and Europe and China, which many of you may not know that they are quite more substantial and deep and important than we normally think. Well, there's no need to say much about the relations between two of the world's most important civilizations, China and Greece. These have been developed and cultivated in the recent years quite extensively. Actually, when I was young, there was hardly any relation between Greece and China, either cultural or commercial or political. But these days, we have quite a number of touching points and communications and relations. Like, for example, our prime ministers have been in China quite several times, and recently our prime minister was there. Our president is traveling there tomorrow, and I will join him tomorrow night. So I will have some time in Beijing with his delegation, and I hope to meet some important people, important for me, and also visit the university, where on the 15th he will come and visit the university and meet people there and also deliver a speech. And I think this is a good achievement because it acknowledges and showcases the cooperation between us here, our foundation, and Tsinghua University. So thank you very much once again. Now, there are much more proficient and accomplished people in this room to speak about China being the prime force in the Far East. Who does not know the colossal development of China over the last decades? Slowly, China has overcome all but one country in the world in the size of its economy, and of course is now flexing its muscles also as a very strong and influential political force, not only in the Far East, but in the whole world. Greece is, of course, an extremely small nation and a weak nation, and a nation full of weaknesses and not really very much to speak about, but it excels and is distinguished in one particular field, which is shipping. And why is that so? Because shipping is a business which we Greeks have been doing for more than 2,500 years. And if you do something for so long, at the end you learn it, and you learn it quite well. Just to give you a comparison, Greece accounts for 0.15% of the world's population, but controls approximately 21% of world shipping capacity. It's the largest fleet in the world, and almost exclusively is occupied in what we call cross-trading. That means carrying goods from one country to another, given the fact that Greece's percentage in world trade is completely non-substantial. This fleet, as I said, equates to about 21% of all shipping capacity in the world. If you count the main kinds of transportation, bulk transportation and liquid cargos, if you take the capacity of all the ships of all types, then Greece occupies again the first place with 18% of total transportation capacity. Second place is occupied by Japan with about 14%, and third place is occupied by China by about 10%. And, you know, China has grown tremendously its merchant fleet, which some 15, 20 years ago was very small. And about 10 years ago, just before the crisis, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of talk that China would grow its fleet very, very rapidly and will become the largest ship-owning nation in the world within very few years. Unfortunately, we've gone now through 10 years of a crisis in the shipping markets, a strong crisis, which actually started with a banking crisis in 2008. But the result has been that apparently the Greeks have managed to survive the crisis in a better shape than many other nations. And therefore, the distance and the difference between the sizes of the fleets of Greece and Japan and Greece and China over the last 10, 11 years has not only not become smaller, in actual fact, it has grown, so that the difference today between Greece and Japan and Greece and China is larger than it was 10 years ago. And there is now quite a certainty that for the next 15 or 20 years, there is no question of any other country overtaking Greece in the size of its fleet. Now, what does this big fleet do for China? We carry about 30% of China's imports of oil, about 20% of its imports in other staple goods like bulk goods, coal, iron ore, or cereals. And we carry about 10% of their imports, but mainly exports, in container ships. Since several years ago, many years ago, when China has joined the World Trade Organization, the shipping cooperation of all nations in the Chinese economic and financial sphere has taken a normal and successful way. And today, it is characterized by normality, by a smoothless development, whereby both the Chinese fleet carries a big percentage of the Chinese goods, but by and large, and in its majority, the Chinese trade is carried by foreign nations, among which, as I said, Greece is the most important one. Now, this has led, and this is something that we repeat again and again and again, that opening the markets and having a worldwide free basis for trading is extremely important. It is extremely important for the continuation and the growth of world trade. It's extremely important for the smooth economic development and the welfare of nations. And it is extremely important for the well-operated international fleets, particularly our own, without which, as we say, half of the world would freeze and the other half would starve. And we are extremely satisfied that the cooperation in the transportation of all kinds of goods between our Greek fleet and China is going very well. Now, China is emerging as a growing important force also in maritime businesses, especially if you consider not only the pure transportation, which for us Greeks is important, but the wider maritime businesses, what we call the maritime cluster. And therefore, we can see that the gravity of the world's maritime businesses is slowly shifting to the Far East, where China, of course, is, together with Japan, the main center. And what best example we can find than the tremendous growth of the Chinese port and port-related businesses. But this is not only the only area where Greece cooperates with China. There is another area in which we Greeks have contributed hugely to China's shipbuilding industry. As you know, the shipbuilding industry in China has gone through a huge transformation. There used to be hundreds, if not thousands, of a variety of sizes of Chinese shipyards. These days there has been a tremendous consolidation. The number of yards has shrunk tremendously. Many yards have disappeared, but those who remained have been consolidated, have been sanitized, and China has slowly become, alongside Japan and Korea, at least in certain areas of shipbuilding, the largest power in the world. But how have they managed that? You may be interested to find out and to hear that over the last 15 years, Greek shipowners have built more than 1,000 ships in China. More than 1,000 ships. Today, Greek ships on order in China are more than 250, with a delivery horizon of the next 3 to 4 years. So, you know, this is the largest number of ships built for any other nation. And if you hear the number, 1,000 ships built in the last 15 years, I think this is awesome. Greece has with Turkey, with China, we've signed in 1996 a Greek-Chinese Maritime Cooperation Agreement, which furthers our shipping and maritime relations in many fronts. It's a very useful agreement, and for the Greek shipping community, the most important part of it is that Greek shipping, which does business with China, is exempt from what is called the freight tax, which applies to many other nations. And we are particularly happy that Greek shipping and Greek shipowners do not have to pay this freight tax. It's a very important issue, but it covers many other initiatives as well, and has been in place, as I say, for more than 20 years now, and is very successful. Who does not know of China's involvement in the Greek port industry? We have had a very bright and thunderous example of a large Chinese investment in Greece with the purchase of the port of Piraeus. Now, the port of Piraeus was for ages a very rather small, insignificant, and very badly run state-owned port. Ideally, what should have happened is that the Greek state should have given out by tender not the entire port, or not sell the entire port, but award by tender the different activities of the port. Say, one company would be engaged in the oil terminal, another in the car terminal, another one in the container terminal, and so on and so forth. Because here in Greece we find it very difficult to do many things at the same time, it was felt that it was better to sell the port, actually. So the port has been sold under certain conditions which both sides have to fulfill. And of course, there is no surprise that the Chinese side has fulfilled its own obligations much quicker than the Greek side has. And therefore, the port of Piraeus, which years back was, I think, the 90th or 100th port in the world in terms of size in the container ships, now occupies the 32nd place, the 6th place in Europe, and the #1 place in the Mediterranean. And I think there is still some growth to come, especially when the part which COSCO is running comes fully into stream, and also when the one part of the port which is still run under the old regime also is modernized. So this is a typical example of a successful, very successful investment. It has gone through very difficult times because it has simply fallen under the wheels of a lot of political and unionized disagreement and aggravations. And still today, it's one step forward and one step backwards. But we think that soon the difficulties which have arisen, and which I'm sure all of you know, one way or the other will be put behind us, and this big investment will continue and prosper. Obviously, this particular investment fits nicely with the big Chinese conceptual project of OBOR, as we know it, One Belt, One Road. And its big strategic value lies in the fact that if you discharge goods in Greece and send them to Central Europe, compared to sending them around with container ships to Antwerp or Rotterdam or Hamburg, you gain almost between 8 and 9 days in time, and you can imagine how important that is in today's relative times, and what savings in costs this entails. Except for the moment, the rail connections between Greece and Central Europe are still not the best. And quite frankly, I had not given much thought or much importance to this concept until I heard that China is financing and helping modernize the railway system of Serbia. And then I was thinking, why on earth would China modernize the railway system of China? Clearly, because the railway system in Serbia is in a very bad shape, and it is extremely long. It is the biggest part between the goods reaching Europe, starting from Piraeus. So it seems that this project is for real, and when it really completes and takes off, it will make a huge difference. It will improve the fortunes of Piraeus and the Greek ports to the detriment of the North European ports. The success of this venture with COSCO has, however, had also has provoked some negative sentiments, especially in Europe, not in Greece. In Greece, we are all in favor, but not only this investment of COSCO, but a great number of other investments also. And I must say, not only in the maritime field, but we all know of a great number of very sizable investments by Chinese entities and Chinese companies in Europe, in banking, businesses, and shipping and ports. And this has raised quite some concerns at the European political circles. In actual fact, this turns around what we call the level playing field, meaning that there are more and more voices in Europe demanding that equal opportunities are granted to European investors in China as are granted to Chinese investors in Europe. And we all know that today this is not the case. And because this is not the case, the European institutions are expressing some worries and some concerns. And one of the strategic strategy groups created under the office of the President of the European Commission, Mr. Juncker, has recently convened to deal precisely with this question of how does one establish and impose a level playing field between Chinese investing in Europe and Europeans investing in China. And we would not like to see that this good climate which exists in the shipping relations between Europe and China is jeopardized in any way. This connection between Europe and China actually stems from an agreement which was signed back in 2008. And it's called the EU-China Maritime Transport Agreement and has so far worked quite successfully. And there are a few other points which must be sorted out between Europe and China. One of them, not extremely important, but quite important, is the issue of recycling of ships, on which Europe still cannot make up his mind. But the main issue I wanted to flag up here is precisely these concerns in Europe about the level playing field. Why I speak about also the European fleet, now you may know, or maybe not, that the European fleet, the fleet which is owned by European ship owners, accounts for 40% of the world's trade, 40%, out of which half, 50%, is Greek owned. So we Greeks have an extreme interest in continuing this good cooperation for the benefit of the freight markets and the benefit of our fleet. So as you see, there are relations there, and there are also prospects for further relations. And we would like to think that this type of open dialogue and communication between Greek and Chinese interests, be it in the sphere of academia or business or politics, can only be to the good of both China and Greece. Two more things. You know that recently, and even very recently, there's a big talk about trade wars. And trade wars seem to be something of a fashion these days, because not only do we have trade wars or threats of trade wars between the US and China, but we have also an underlying bad climate between the EU and the United States. And this can't be positive or beneficial for anyone. My own view is that the pure economic and financial damage done by the situation as it is until now is not that significant, because the goods that are affected are a drop in the ocean if you compare them to the total of the world's trade. But the psychological effect is unfortunately quite negative, both in terms of the shipping markets, futures, and the commodities markets. It's more the psychological damage and the inhibition that is created in wanting to trade and wanting to do business, rather than the actual damage itself. And clearly, as is the case in all such wars, when one is threatening one action, the other side is very quick to reciprocate and threaten from their side, and this is what we've heard in the last few days, starting from the US, from President Trump, replied quite forcefully, I think yesterday, by China. And finally, I'm very glad to say that I'm leaving for China tomorrow, accompanying our president, who is going there for a state visit. And I look forward to see many of my friends there, visit the university where our president will hold a speech on the 15th, and I hope many of us will be there. And I think this is a very good sign about the cordial and good relations we have between Greece and China, between the Greek shipping world and the Chinese shipping interests, and between the Laskaridis Foundation and the Tsinghua University. Thank you very much. And once again, many thanks for joining us.
I would like to ask Professor Zhang Lihua to join us and say a few words about her perception of the situation today.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Laskaridis for his outstanding contribution to supporting China-Greece cultural exchange and cooperation. Mr. Laskaridis is very passionate about Greek classical culture spreading in the world. He sponsored the Sino-Greek Cultural Exchange and Cooperation Program at Tsinghua University, Mariana Laskaridis project, which enhanced the scholarship and the student exchange between Chinese and Greece. From 2015 until now, this project has sent more than 10 graduate students to visit Athens for study, and received 4 famous Greek professors to lecture in Tsinghua University. I thank Konstantinos Mazarakis very much for him organize the seminar and invite me attend the seminar. Maybe I talk about this one?
Yes.
Oh, now I want to talk about the topic Chinese diplomacy for the new era and its core value. The new era of Chinese diplomacy refers to China's diplomacy since the reform and opening up in 1978. That is Chinese diplomacy under the government period of Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, Xi Jinping, including Chinese diplomatic guidelines, policies, and practice. First, I talk about the guidelines, policies, and the practice for Chinese diplomacy in the new era. First of all, I want to introduce Deng Xiaoping period from the 1978 to 1989. Deng Xiaoping defined the guidelines for China's diplomacy since the reform and opening up. Peace and development are underlining trends the world. China belongs to the third world. China is not a superpower, nor will she ever seek to be one. Some countries in the third world want China to take the lead, but we must not take the lead. This is fundamental national policy. He advocates that China should follow an independent foreign policy of peace and determine our own position and policy independence according to the merits of the matter itself. And China should exchange with all countries and make friends with everyone. Be fair, be impartial, and support whoever pursues peace and oppose whoever pursues war and hegemony. With regard to state-to-state relations, China does not care about difference in social system and ideology. Exchange with all countries and makes friends with everyone. All these guidelines have been implemented in China's foreign policy and practice until now. So China has entered a new era of foreign relations with economic construction as its core. Firstly, establish good relations with the US. China and the United States formally established diplomatic relations on January 1st, 1979. Deng Xiaoping did the work directly with the leader of the US and promote the signing of the third joint communique between China and the US. Secondly, establish good relations with the Soviet Union in 1989. China normalized relations with the Soviet Union. Thirdly, established good relations with neighboring countries, resume relations with Japan, relations with neighboring countries such as India, Indonesia and Vietnam between normalized in 1919. China established diplomatic relations with Singapore, etc. Fourth, strengthen relations with developing countries. China established diplomatic relations with South Africa. Third, second, Jiang Zemin period. Yeah. After the social politics change in East European and the Soviet Union in 1991, Deng Xiaoping left a paragraph about China's foreign policy. Observe keenly, keep steady, cope strengthly, keep a low profile, never take the leader, never take the leader in the world, and make a difference. President Jiang Zemin carried out Deng Xiaoping's proposed foreign policy. He applied the traditional Chinese thought of harmony to diplomatic field and proposed the idea of harmony in diversity. He said that all civilization, social system, and development mode of the world should communication and learn from each other, draw on each other's strengths in peaceful competition, and seek common development where reserving differences. Differences in countries and differences in social system should not affect their harmonious coexistence. Friendly exchange, no mutual benefit, cooperation, and common development, where concentrates on economic development. Jiang Zemin led China to strive to develop all-round cooperation relations with other countries and create a peaceful internal environment for reform, open up, and modernization. For 1990 to 2002, President Jiang Zemin visited over 70 countries with 109 visiting activities, make many friends, and gradually open up new development situation. In 1991, social and political change happened in East European and Soviet Union. Chinese established diplomacy relations with Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the newly independent country in the former Soviet Union. After the social and political change in East Europe, China continued to maintain friendly relations with Eastern European countries. China established partnership at various levels with major powers such as Russia, US, France, as well as important developing countries, open the diplomacy practice of partnership instead of alliance. In 1996, Jiang Zemin visited India and proposed a new orientation for China-India relations. The third Hu Jintao period, 2002, from 2002 to 2012. President Hu Jintao put forward a new concept of building a harmony world. He said that China is determined not to follow path of war in which some countries rose up in history, but to continue to unswerving following the path of peaceful development. The main idea of this path is to strive for the peaceful international environment to develop ourselves and promote world peace through our own development. Pursue development through our own strengths and reform and innovation, and adhere to open up and follow the trends of economic globalization, and strive to achieve the mutual benefit and win-win with all countries. He emphasized the strengths of public diplomacy and humanity diplomacy, carrying out various forms of foreign cultural exchange activities to solidly spreading excellent Chinese culture. The fourth, Xi Jinping parade from the 2013 until today. President Xi Jinping proposed a Bilateral diplomatic concept and building a new type of international relations and a community with a share for mankind, following a policy of pursuing the great good and share interest and promoting the construction of Belt Road and the principle of amity, sincerity, mutual benefit. He emphasized that only when the world is doing well can China do well, and when China is good, the world is better. Building a community of human density became the guide ideology of Chinese diplomacy in the new era. Since Xi Jinping was in office, China has established extensive partnership around the world, forming a multi-level and multi-regional network of global partnership. As of 2014, China has established a partnership with 58 countries. China has extensively participated in various multilateral economic cooperation mechanisms, promotes the reform of international financial institutes such as International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, and support multilateral mechanisms such as G20, APEC, and the BRICS, and to play a coordinating role in the global economic governance. Since the 21st century, China has actively participated in UN peacekeeping operation. As president, China is the country with the largest number of peacekeepers among the permanent members of the UN Security Council and the second largest contributor to UN peacekeeping operations. The second, the core value of the new era of Chinese diplomacy. What is the core value of Chinese diplomacy? what is the root source of Chinese diplomacy value? I think the guidelines, principle, and the policy of Chinese diplomacy in the new era has been influenced by the philosophy of Lao Tzu and the ethics of Confucius, and the diplomatic philosophy of Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, Xi Jinping, and China's diplomatic guidelines fully show this. We are the traditional Chinese cultural value are the source of China's diplomatic value. What are traditional Chinese cultural value? These are harmony, benevolence, righteousness, courtesy, wisdom, and faith. This thought and value advocated by Lao Tzu philosophy, Confucianism, and Yi Jing, Yin Yang dialectics philosophy. The harmony, the harmony thought, including a kind of ideal goals, harmony between human and nature, harmony between human and society, harmony between person to person, harmony between human body and heart and mind. Lao Tzu expressed the harmony as people do things should be follow the law of the nature and the society. Harmony means the things fitting each other in an appropriate and well-balanced way. The harmony value of harmony in diversity are evidently embodied by the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence proposed by Chinese government. The harmony value of harmony in diversity are evidently embodied by the new security. President Hu Jintao proposed to build a harmony world, reflect the harmony value. President Xi Jinping proposed the basic principle, the better route, common discussion, building together, sharing together, reflect the harmony value. Benevolence is a core value of Confucianism, as well as the value commonly recognized and respected by Chinese people. It means to love others and know the difference between good and evil. Confucius said that anyone only doing things for personal interest would lead to great resentments from others. In addition to personal interest, people living social relations should have collective and social interest and should combine personal interest with social interest. Since 1960, China has provided significant aid to affiliate countries. In recent decades, China has exemplified 50 heavily indebted poor nations of debt of renminbi 30 billion. In over 60 years, China has actively involved in international development and cooperation and has provided aid of approximately renminbi 400 billion to a total of 166 national and international organizers. The basic principle, the Belt and Road Initiative proposed by Xi Jinping, sharing, building mutual benefit cooperation and mutual benefit, reflect the benevolence. The wretchedness refer to appropriateness and justice. It emphasizes that people should do things based on the objective law and should have the sense of justice, of safeguarding personal dignity and protecting the family and the motherland from enrichment. An ancient Chinese saying, "We were not attacked unless we were attacked. If we were attacked, we were certainly counteracted." The Sun Tzu Art, 孙子兵法, and the Sun Bin Art, 孙膑兵法, provides the wisdom, tactic, and strategy of struggle against the invaders and intruders. China has proposed new security concept featuring mutual trust, mutual benefit, equality, and cooperation, and the principle of cooperation and common interest, which also reflect the richness value. Etiquette emphasize the word and the conduct should meet etiquette, and men should be modest and prudent and should not what one wishes without restraints. According to Confucius, it is benevolence to control oneself to following the etiquette. The etiquettes recommended by Chinese traditional culture include the etiquette system and the law. Like Confucius said, when the ruler at higher rank obey the etiquette and law, it becomes easier to govern peoples. Etiquette also means the man should be modest to others, respect to others, polite to others, do not arrogant and bully others. Lao Tzu said the sea can hold thousands of rivers due to its low position. So the sea becomes the king of the river. So Lao Tzu suggests the great power should gain the dependence of small country by being modest, where the small country should win cooperation with the great power by being modest. In this way, the great power and the small country could respectively attain their own winning. In particularly, the great power should be modest. So, for the relations with neighboring countries, China proposed diplomatic policy of bringing harmony, security, and prosperity to neighbors, and represent the idea of amity, sincerity, mutual benefit, and inclusiveness, and benevolence and good neighborliness. The relationship between China and ASEAN, Central Asia countries fully reflect the value. Wisdom means that people should distinguish between right and wrong, and have wisdom and strategic thinking. According to Confucius, the benevolence love people and treat others well, and could distinguish between the right and wrong. Yin-yang dialectic is the basis of value of harmony. Advocates looking at things comprehensively and dialectically, and generally oppose carrying things to the extremity. A warning in the Book of Change says, prosperity, think of adversity. The Yi Jing, this is the sentence, Yi Jing, from Yi Jing. A dragon flying too high would feel hard to breathe due to thin air, and coldness there, fall down and death. This is the Yi Jing. The means, this sentence told Chinese leader, China will never hegemony in the world. So, from Deng Xiaoping to Xi Jinping have always stressed China will never take the lead, as a leader in the world. China will never seek hegemony. It embodies the wisdom of the Yi Jing thought. Since reform and open up, China has maintained over 4 decades and reaped economic development and seen increasing powerful strengthening. However, for Sino-US relations, China does not challenge American or combat against American, but attaches special importance to building the relations of mutual trust, cooperation, and common interest with the US. The idea of building new model of major power relations expressly proposed by Xi Jinping. China vigorously developed Sino-US trade to relieve Americans' hostility against China, reaching economic integrity of 2 countries, facilitates the understanding between 2 countries through cultural exchange, and focal communication and reduce the antagonism of US. Recently, the President Trump has provoked Sino-US trade friction. The Chinese government has been trying to negotiate with the US and made many concessions. However, China has principle and bottom line. If the US demands supplies the China's bottom line, China will not agree. Therefore, on the one hand, China and the US have been negotiating. On the other hand, China is also ready for emergency and counter-radical. This practice reflects Yi Jing wisdom. Faithfulness refers to keeping one's words and being honest. According to the dialectic of Confucius, only when the promise meets the wretchedness, the word could be realized, and it could improve the moral by focusing on loyalty and faithfulness and following wretchedness. Confucius advocates that people should rationally and appropriately get the wise based on labor and law, and should not gain wise by cheating or dishonesty. Since reform and open up, China had grown a lot from the World Bank. But every law can be repeated on time and is rated as the best loan country by the World Bank. So, conclusion. Chinese culture is based on human relationship. It emphasizes self-cultivation, concern for family, love for one's country, and care for the world. Chinese traditional cultural value still exist in Chinese people's heart and make up the values recognized by most Chinese people. And criteria to judge the right and wrong, the harmony, benevolence, righteousness, etiquette, wisdom, faithfully have been influenced China's diplomacy until today. The cultural values are completely different with the law of the jungle, of the strong ruling over the weak, and the Cold War mentality. In current world, the harmony in diversity, seeking common ground, and reserving different and peaceful coexistence, cooperation, and win-win. This philosophy and the principle provide a new idea for settling international dispute. The Chinese traditional cultural value system of harmony will contribute to world peace. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lihua. I will call now Dr. Liu Zuokui, Senior Research Fellow, Director of the Department of Central and Eastern European Studies, Institute of European Studies, CAS, Director of the Secretariat Office of the 16+1 Think Tanks Network.
Thank you.
You
Thank
have
you,
the floor.
Professor. Thank you for Professor Zhang Lihua's very thoughtful and profound presentation for us. Respected President of the Laskaridis Foundation, Panos Laskaridis, respected moderators and researchers, professors, and lawyers, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored and glad to attend this interesting event jointly organized by the Laskaridis Foundation and the Tsinghua University. And here I, together with my colleague, Professor Director Song Xiaomin, to show our real appreciation to the invitation and the hospitable arrangement for our visit. We really get a lot from this visit. Entrusted by Professor Zhang, I now represent the Chinese Academy of Social Science and also Tsinghua University to say some words on this opening section. China and Greece are the most important civilization representative in the world or in Asia and Europe. In the long history, they contribute a lot to the world civilization development, society development, and cultural development. And also, both countries are encouraging the trans-cultural dialogue, trans-cultural exchange. Now, in China, we have a very interesting word to summarize the trans-cultural dialogue, which is the cultural connectivity. And among these, especially the Laskaridis had played an important role to provide the bigger platform to promote a trans-cultural dialogue. Our Chinese Academy of Social Science, as the highest level academic institution, are very, very interested to join. It's very, very interested to join this process, this dialogue, this exchange. On this special occasion, I would like to share at least 3 important good news to our participant. I think this good news will pave our future cooperation here. The first good news is that several days later, the Asia Civilization Dialogue will be held in Beijing, and our President Xi Jinping will attend this opening ceremony. And what's important is that the 2 important presidents from Greece, one is your Greek nation, the president of Greek nation, also the president of the Laskaridis Foundation, have been invited to attend this conference. We are very looking forward to it. We hope you can contribute your ideas, wisdom to promote the China-Greece, China and the world dialogue to promote the cultural understanding with each other. And the second good news I would like to share with you is that in the last summit, I mean the China and the Central and the East European Summit, Greece has successfully joined this 16+1 framework, which upgraded the 16+1 framework to the 17+1 framework. This is a new impetus or new engine to promote this framework from different dimensions, at least from the maritime, cycle, road building, and the culture exchange. I think these 2 dimensions are important to the future development of the 16 or 17+1 cooperation. And the third good news is that now our Chinese Academy of Social Science want to build a China Center in Greece. Now we are finding the eligible partner in Greece, and we want to also promote the platform, promote the transcultural dialogue with our Greece counterpart. Here I'm very looking forward to any feedback from our Greek counterpart. Generally speaking, here I want to emphasize that some countries in the world try to withdraw from some platform, but China is always trying to provide some platform to framework to the world. We welcome all the time to the relevant participants to join the public goods provided by Chinese government to jointly promote some cultural dialogue, cultural exchange with each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. I would now like to ask our good friend Vasilis Trigas, who was together with Mrs. Voussira, the first, how can I say, the first light that shone on our common intervention with the Tsinghua University, to come here on the table. I would also like the previous speakers to come. Mr. Laskaridis, Professor Zhang Lihua, and Dr. Zuokui to come for a short period of questions and answer. We will keep it very short because immediately afterwards we will go in the garden where there is dinner, and in a relaxed atmosphere we will be able to discuss whatever we want. So I would like to ask if there are, first I would like a very short comment by Vasilis, and then we can have a very short question and answer period.
Well, thank you very much, Admiral. Let me start by saying I'm deeply humbled to be here among some of the greatest experts on shipping, law, and professors from Greece. 4 years ago, I met Panos Laskaridis, and I said, look, everybody's in Tsinghua. The Schwarzman people from New York are spending 200 billions to set up a college and make sure that the American perspective and the American leadership will be present in the university. But the Greeks are not there. So let's try to build something together at Tsinghua to basically show to the Chinese the importance of Hellenism. And Panos, without a second thought, he joined immediately in the process. And he reached out to the Chinese in Tsinghua, and in just like a couple of years, we have more than 10 Chinese scholars from Tsinghua who have visited the foundation, and they have seen the beauty of Greece. And most of them, what they told me after their visit is that you Greeks are so smart. We met these bright professors from the University of Athens, the University of Piraeus. They're exceptional. Why your economy is so wrong? Okay, so individually, the Greeks are excelling everywhere in the world. But also, let me stress something else. If you see the larger image, if you see the forest, not the trees, there are two structural forces right now. The one is populism. Being in Beijing, a lot of the Chinese professors reach out and they're saying, Vasilis, what's going on in Europe? Why can you not keep your house in order? And I'm telling them, don't worry, the Third Reich only endured for 12 years. Then they're more scared than before. That was a joke. The second issue here is that there is a structural change when it comes to the securitization of the system. The United States was quite comfortable when China was small, poor, and weak. But right now, China is already the second largest economy. And if you count PPP, purchasing power parity, China is the largest economy in the world. So there is a process in the United States of perhaps a new Cold War. There's a mentality of a new bipolar era. Last week, at the US State Department, there was some discussion of a new class of civilizations. There was a discussion that we are the Caucasians and they are the Asians. So we have to find a new way to fight a Cold War. But what we are doing at the Laskaridis Foundation, what the Greeks are trying to do in China and in the United States, is basically to show that culture, civilization, and values are universal. And that it's not really race that shapes a civilization, but ethics. Not genes, but creed. And I think in the past 4 years, the Chinese have been here because of Mr. Laskaridis, and the Greek professors have gone to China. We're trying to show to the Chinese that the West is not close to them, that we are open. So I think this initiative is extraordinary. So thank you once again for all your contribution.
First of all, I would like to ask is there any, does any one of the speakers want to say something before we start a question and answer? No, okay. Any questions? we will not bite. Yes, please. Professor Platias.
Hi, I'm Platias from the University of Piraeus. I would also like to welcome the Chinese delegation here. And my question is, if there is a trade war, which country of the big ones, China and the United States, is more resilient to win that trade war? And what will be the impact on Europe?
Dr. Zuokui.
I think maybe it's not a good question because you know that in China we try to avoid any wars, even the Cold War. We dislike this, and there is a famous person in Greece. Thucydides trap. You know this. It's
I'm talking about trade war. Right?
Yeah. Trade war. Yeah. So we think that according to the real situation, there will be no winner. Not only the trade war, but also the other war. There will be no winner. If we talk this in the past 80 years or 90 years, maybe you can find some winners. But now it will not happen. This is totally coincident with China's believing that in the world you can only select the win-win result. There will be not one winner, which Donald Trump have emphasized that USA will become the only winner. From Chinese understanding, we think that in the world there will be no only one winner. Maybe I can answer the question.
If I may, I think Laskaridis is more qualified given that he makes money out of trade, so has a better comment.
Well, I think the most telling example is that during the last few months, when the United States have tried to impose a kind of trade war and type of taxes to Chinese imported goods, the US trade balance did not shrink, but on the contrary, it expanded. So world trade is so big and so intricated between the different big nations today that I don't think that any one tax or any one trade restriction can bring a benefit to any party. So, and we all know, as I said also before when I was speaking on the floor, that there's not only a direct threat of trade war between China and the US, but there are also other noises and threats coming out of the United States, both against Europe and also against Mexico or other nations. So we can really think that this is a jerk reaction by the American administration, the current American administration, which, seems in the period of globalization, in my view, cannot have any big success. And it may work for some short time, but I don't think it can fundamentally influence the world trade, which certainly is much deeper and much more complicated than certain politicians think these days. So it is annoying. It has a psychological effect, but I don't think it will fundamentally change the development of world trade. We can see that the predictions for the world growth are not substantially influenced by these noises, so I'm not too worried.
Let me just very quickly say something. Well, the United States has been the underwriter of security, and they have paid a lot of money, right, to make sure that the sea lanes will be open. So in terms of the structural conditions of change, of trade, they have an argument to make. They need reciprocity. They need the level playing field. So on the commercial dimension, I think the Chinese and the Americans are big powers. They're big players. They're mature. They might be able to reach out to kind of solution that works for both. But this can only happen if both countries, both civilizations understand that they share certain human traits. So that's why I said earlier that the clash of civilizations is a wrong approach. But a trade war, it's structural, it's economic. They can have a deal with benefits for both, a deal with dignity. And I think even the Trump administration, the way they approach the trade discussions is structural. So they look at it and they're saying, if the Chinese give us more market access, if they give us reciprocity, we'll be able to reach to a deal. So I wouldn't say that the Chinese or the Americans would lose much. However, Germany will have a lot of trade distortion because a lot of the German companies have built their industrial bases in China, and if the Americans increase their tariffs, particularly when it comes to cars and imports, that will be a problem for the Germans. And even when it comes to numbers, the trade surplus of China is about 1.7% of GDP. The trade surplus of Germany is 7% of GDP, 5 times higher. So I would be much more kind of careful as a European, because Europe and Germany would have the kind of big loss from a prolonged trade dispute.
Yeah, I will add several words for your Vasily's comments. I think his comment is really touched the point. Is really touching the point that during our premier when Li Keqiang visited the European Union, and the European Union representative have emphasized for several times that, please, if China and the US want to negotiate a deal, please don't sacrifice the interests of the European Union, the European countries. This is really true that maybe they think the trade war will pose any challenge to the European economics. I would like to add to other 2 points that one is both sides, American and China, they want to reach agreement as soon as possible, because both sides have realized that it will seriously harmful to both countries' economy and the development. So this is the first point I would like to emphasize. The second point is that now China and the US are on the bargaining process. If you see this bargaining, it doesn't follow that only one side to make any concessions. The other would not. I think both sides should make some concession based on the reciprocal or mutual benefits. So these are 2 points I would like to emphasize. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Microphone.
My name is Xiaomi So from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and thank you very much for a very excellent keynote speech. And we know maritime cooperation has developed very quickly, and some scholars said that we can see a new cooperation model in maritime cooperation. And except shipbuilding, maritime transport, what do you think was a new cooperation field? Because, both of us should contribute to further and further. Was a new area, new idea. Thank you so much.
Very simple answer to this question. You have a lot of cargo, we have a lot of ships. Ships need cargoes and the cargoes need ships. So I think there is so far quite a little cooperation between Greeks having ships and Chinese having cargoes. Everything is happening in the open free market. I think there can be a deeper cooperation because, our ships are, you have to imagine, are like the lorries or the taxis of the sea. We are looking for cargoes all the time. And it is very important for us to have a constant and big and increasing cargo base. Without it, we cannot survive because we don't have any cargoes. Now, China and many big many big industrial countries sometimes have big dreams to build their own fleet and carry their own cargoes. But this has never happened 100% successful in history. Everyone who has a lot of cargoes needs the ships of somebody else. I can give you some examples. The big oil companies. Many years ago, they were dreaming to build their own ships, and they had a lot of ships to carry their oil cargoes. But today they have abandoned this. Many of the big fruit companies, maybe you know the big banana companies, had also built their own fleets to carry their own fruit. Today they've disappeared. So generally from history we know somebody who has a lot of cargo can have ships to carry maybe 25% of his cargo. This is the sound and logical size of a fleet. For all the rest, the 75%, he must depend on independent carriers. And as I say, we are the biggest ship-owning nation in the world, but we don't have cargoes. Chinese ship owners do have cargoes. We don't have. So we are very dependent, and our, let's say, hope, our dream is that we can find partners who will give us what we need to carry and make our business. So this is the way to go. Sure.
Maybe I would like to take this opportunity to ask one question to Panos Laskaridis. I just noticed a news report from a local media in Greece. This report is from your Prime Minister's speech that Greece just joined the Sixth Part-1 framework, and they will play a leading role in Balkan Peninsula and also the Central and Eastern region to promote China and Central and Eastern European cooperation. So now I'm very curious, I'm very interested into the leading role of Greece in this region. What do you consider this leading role, the meaning? Thank you.
Well, you know, two things you must know about shipping in Greece. Shipping in Greece has nothing to do with the government. Luckily, it does not depend on the Greek government. So the Greek government can sign agreements and can sign some participations in different conventions or different agreements, but then it is up to the Greek maritime community to actually implement these and take part in these. And this the Greek shipping community and the Greek maritime community will do only if there is a commercial benefit, either for making more money or for safeguarding the interests of our maritime fleet and our maritime business. So any involvement and any work in this direction will come from the private sector, not from the government. The government is not able to do that. The government is able to diplomatically make agreements, but then the implementation most certainly will come from the private sector, which is extremely agile and extremely capable. So we are very hopeful with this development.
Let me just add quickly. So the relationship when it comes to shipping between Greece and China is symbiotic. That's what I got. But I think it's necessary to develop auxiliary services. Of course, you have the ships, you have the transportation, but we also have commercial arbitration, for instance. And I think when it comes to lawyers in Greece, there are some of the top lawyers in the world. People like Professor Rokas, who is here with us today. And if, for instance, China wants to build a more responsible brand for their investments abroad, instead of having the dispute being resolved in China, given that perhaps some countries will not really trust the decisions made in Chinese courts, those disputes could be resolved under Chinese law in Piraeus. And that means that Greek lawyers, experts in shipping and commerce, would be the arbitrators, along with their Chinese partners, or perhaps committees from other countries as well. And that would basically create a very strong, soft infrastructure with very high standards for the fiduciary responsibility of institutional investors. And when we talk about institutional investors, we're talking about multi-billion of portfolios. Just to give you a number, pension funds in the world manage something like $20 trillion, right? $20 trillion is higher than the GDP of China. Higher than the GDP of China. That means there's enormous potential for the Belt and Road Initiative to attract private donors or private investors if there is very high legal standards enforced outside of China. And I think Piraeus could be a case, a point, a geographical point, given the investment of Costco, where auxiliary services could be developed.
If I can just comment on what Vasily said. Well, first of all, in Greece, we do have quite a wide range of, we call them maritime businesses and circuits. And these are quite well developed in Greece, except what you mentioned, Vasily, the kind of dispute resolution. Now, Mr. Rokas is here, he knows the situation probably much better than I, but I have been in this business for nearly 50 years now. The problem in Greece is this. Well, first of all, if you want to have dispute resolution, you cannot only have arbitration, resolution by arbitration. You must have also resolution by maritime courts. You cannot have one without the other. And the problem in Greece is that, unfortunately, in the case of the maritime courts, there have been efforts since, I remember, decades to establish them. We tried to establish specialized maritime courts. That didn't work. So I'm sorry to say that I'm not particularly hopeful that this will happen anytime soon. But obviously, it is something that we would very much like to see, because that will complement the rest of the maritime activities that we do have here, like banks, law firms, surveyors, classifications, average adjusters. It's just this dispute resolution that we are missing, but there we need to see an urgent and rapid and drastic improvement of the judicial system. Thank you.
Mr. Rokas, do you want to?
Fully correct, Mr. Laskaridis. That's the case with maritime arbitrations and the whole story, is all we know here. But there's not only maritime arbitrations and not only all kinds of arbitration. The commercial arbitration, purely commercial arbitration, especially between China and Greek interests, that makes sense now. This is something which is realistic. Because of course we are tired to try about maritime arbitration center, and it fails. And but I think in Greece, because it's different interests, a bit different interests than other North European countries, and it is something between China and Europe, and it is we say here in Greece it's a breach. We hope it is a breach in Greece. We allege it is a breach. We hope it's a breach. I think it could make sense if both parties own, not only the individual. Here we have to be helped by China. If China side wants it, then it is easier to be realized. Thank you.
Can I put one question to our Chinese friends? We hear a lot and we know a lot about the maritime side of the Belt and Road Initiative. But what about the overland situation? Can you please tell us a couple of words about how this is developing or not developing? Sometimes we hear it's going well, then next time we hear there are countries which are not so happy with this. Can you tell us where do we stand today with the overland Belt and Road Initiative?
China is an ancient civilization country. Greece also is an ancient civilization country. So China and Greece have a very good cultural basic and cultural fruit. Ancient China and the Middle Age China were not a religion country. However, China had a tradition culture. China had a harmony thought. China had a harmony value. China had a harmony philosophy. This archaeology have been affect Chinese people and Chinese diplomacy, foreign policy, foreign practice. Even if China is strong, more and more strong, maybe in the future China will be superpower. It does not want to compete with the United States. It does not hegemony in the world. According to Lao's philosophy, Confucius' political thought, according to the harmony philosophy, Yi Jing dialectics. Yeah. This is the root, this is the source of the archaeology of China's diplomacy. So, China, I think, China and the United States, where China hope China and the United States will maintain a mutual benefit win-win relationship. The suited trap between China and the US does not exist, I think, I believe. That's all.
Good. I don't think whether I can answer the president's question. That maybe tomorrow I will have a presentation, maybe upon your question. But before that, I try to answer you from several points. Yeah. Maybe you know that our Belt Road Initiative is something like an initiative. It's not a strategy. When you talk about the Belt Road building, there are two dimensions. One is the Silk Road building. The other is the Maritime Silk Road. And this is a two-dimension. And for the Maritime building in Europe, we call this China-Europe Land and Sea Express. Among this, Greece play a very, very important role. We call this, in China, we can tell, we call it play a shuttle position in Greece. So this, I think this is the highest positioning of your role in the Maritime Silk Road between China and Europe. When we talk about the Silk Road building, we often talk it's China-Europe connectivity, not only for the road, the railway, but also for the goods transportation from Asia, Europe. We call this China-Europe Express. Now, our President Xi Jinping attached high importance to this division, this transportation, this connectivity. Anyway, you know that this project will last a little longer time, not so short time, especially during this construction of the Maritime Silk Road. Greece will always play a very important role along the Maritime Silk Road. Anyway, we have other route from China to Southeast Asia, from China to other countries, but for China to Europe, Greece will be the shuttle, play a shuttle role. Yeah.
And could you talk a little bit about the Italians? Are they trying to bring Trieste as a competing point of entry to Europe?
Yeah.
And also, if you could talk about Düsseldorf, when it comes to what Laskaridis asked about the land express between China Railway and Central Europe, Düsseldorf has become a port an inland port.
Yeah.
So
this will involve some enterprises strategy. And you know that our state-owned enterprises are seriously influenced by the government. When COSCO has acquired the port of Belarus, we have identified the Belarus port as the only shuttle port in Europe, which means that you should not build the second shuttle port. This is the enterprise strategy, and which make the Greece port become the dominant player, dominant actor in the connectivity cooperation between China and Europe. Maybe we will develop another port in Greece, in Italy, in Slovenia, in also in some other country neighboring to the Adriatic area. But we will not change the role, the shuttle role of the Greece port. Maybe this is my answer.
Is there any other question? No.
Could I say something?
Okay, I understand there are no other questions. So the cycle.
Keep quite quick comment about somebody.
You want to comment?
No, yeah, I just want to say that without Professor Sakellaris, who has been to Tsinghua twice, and Professor Platias, I don't think this initiative would have been so successful. So please join me in an applaud for the two very bright Greek professors here, and everybody.
So thank you, everybody. We can continue discussing outside over wine. Thank you.
Thank you very much.